What's good, everybody? I'm here with Dylan Nadler. He is the founder of MindLock. And Dylan, can you just tell people what you do?
My name is Dylan Nadler. I'm the founder of MindLock Mental Training. And basically, I'm a mental performance coach to athletes all around the world, focusing on, not just the physical side of training, preparation, and competition, but all of the psychological tools and tips and tricks as well.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit, I guess, more about, what led you here? What's your background in?
Yeah, so I started on the athlete side. So my parents put me in Taekwondo when I was 5, and then that's kind of what I was in my whole life. I ended up representing Team Canada as captain of the national team. Later on, traveling all around the world, fighting for Team Canada from Europe, Asia, South America, and just kind of experiencing sport at the highest levels. And that's when I really started to learn firsthand, like, okay, sport, especially combat sport, it's important that, physically you're there technically and stuff like that. But the mental side is crazy too.
Yeah.
And that's the one piece that we don't really focus on enough. I noticed like all these national teams, they have their nutritionist and they have their team doctors and they have, all the technical stuff. Nothing on the mental side. And for me, I was never the tallest or strongest, fighter in my division, but I think I had a pretty good mindset, and, trying to focus on the mental skills mixed with the physical, I think brought me a lot of success. So, when I stopped competing, I was like, man, I think this is really important. It's something that helped me a lot. I know it's something I've helped others with. So there has to be, an opportunity to expose this to, other people. Let's roll with it.
Was there challenges that you had that kind of led you to kind of go down a path where you had to start discovering more strategies and techniques? Were there things that you were struggling with or that you noticed other people struggling with on that team?
Yeah, there's one moment that stands out to me the most, I think, is to when it kind of acts as the catalyst for when I started to understand how important the mental side is. Yeah. So, in 2013, I was selected to represent Team Canada at the final leg of the qualification process for the Youth Olympic Games. So the Youth Olympic Games were going to be 2014 in China. And for me, I had already earned my spot by basically winning this fight off against kind of everybody in my division in the country. So by winning that fight off, basically, I earned my ticket to Taiwan. I go to Taiwan, and now I'm fighting against every single country since their top athlete in the division. It's a big fight off, and you have to finish top 8 to qualify for the Olympics. So physically, I couldn't have been in a better position. I was training 3 times a day. My cardio was great. My diet was great. I was cutting weight, at a regular, kind of progression. Everything was there in terms of the physical prep. And when I got there is when I really started to notice, like, man, the things that are throwing me off aren't the physical things. It's the little stuff. It's like, I don't really understand the language and what people are saying. The foods that I'm used to are so different here than back home. Because I was younger. I was like, 13, 14 at the time. Little things like I was about to walk into the ring and they gave me a different, kind of headgear because we were used to wearing kind of helmets. And, up until then, I had always been able to bring my own, but then they supplied me with one last minute so that the strap didn't feel the way I wanted it to feel. It was a little bit loose, and all these little moments, by the time I walked into the ring, I was a little bit more distracted. I was a little bit more disoriented. It was a super chaotic environment. And, I totally underperformed, not because from a physical, technical standpoint, I wasn't better than my opponent. I just kind of blew it on my end, and it was a terrible feeling, especially to go to the other side of the world after preparing for this long, trying to get, that Olympic dream to come true, realizing that, physically I was exactly where I needed to be, but I had so many mental lapses along the way. And that was a big catalyst for me. That was like, I never want that to happen again. I'm going to make sure that not only am I, physically as prepared as I can be, but from a mental standpoint, I want to be bulletproof too.
Yeah. And so I guess what was the first step to creating and systemizing this? Like, how did you go from, it's quite a jump. Like, okay, I am now, I'm an athlete. Now I'm going to become a mental performance coach. There's some steps, obviously, from that to that. So what were those, I guess, steps?
Yeah, so I stopped competing in 2017, and basically, at the end of the year, so I basically made that switch right away. So, I started MindLock like February 2018. So we're basically at, the 6-year mark right now.
Nice. Congrats.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was a slow build. I mean, there was a lot of understanding. What does this look like? Am I any good at it? How would it look? It was a lot of experimenting. And I think for me, I kind of committed to this mindset of, okay, I feel like I've got this down. I've done a lot of kind of reading. I'm in school for this. But is it going to be any good? Is it going to work? And I think, that's where a lot of people stall a little bit, right? It's that, kind of like analysis paralysis thing where it's like, when do I do it? When do I go all in? And I kind of figured, listen, I'm going to be a pretty poor judge of this right now. If I just leave it to me, let me start, let me try, and I'll just let kind of the market tell me if this is good or bad. I'll work with some athletes, and if it works for them and they want to continue the work we're doing, great. I know we're doing something right. If it's not really working for them and they don't really want to continue, well, then I know I need to take a step back, go back to the drawing board and figure it out. So I figured, you know what, let me just take action. And from there, I'll learn a lot more through that process of just executing than I would from twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the perfect moment to happen. So it was a lot of experimenting. It was a lot of just taking it one step at a time, really like a slow process at first, and then just building and building and building until, 6 years later, we're one of the authorities in mental training for athletes across the world.
Yeah, it's epic to watch that. I got your name from Ross Levine. So Ross Levine is the karate combat world champion at middleweight. He is an excellent martial artist, high fight IQ, also just incredibly strong, not only physically, but mentally. And he talked about you as being a key part of his team. Can you explain like your philosophy and your approach to training in general?
Yeah, my philosophy is that everybody deserves to experience the best version of themselves as an athlete, right? I think that's really what we strive for, but I think a lot of the time that gets mixed up with results, right? People say, I want to be a world champion. I want to fight as a pro. I want to earn this title. I want to have a ranking of this. And sometimes that kind of competes with this sense of just being the best version of yourself. Right. I think if you're prioritizing the results, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get to that place of being the best version of yourself. I think if you prioritize your own performance and, really maximizing your potential, well, yeah, the likelihood of you getting those accolades and achievements goes up. So for me, my philosophy is how do we get you to a place where you're consistently performing at the highest range of your potential? Because with that, a lot of the things that you want to see from your career will come with it. But, as I've seen time and time again, and as I've experienced myself, and as you've probably experienced on your end too, with yourself and with your athletes, that's the tough part, is the consistent high performance, right? Anybody can look good in the gym. Everybody looks good in sparring. Everybody feels like they've got it down. And then the real test is when you're pushed in competition, are you consistently competing at your best? It's very, very hard to do, but I think that becomes the standard. So a lot of what I do just comes from how can we get you to a place where you're consistently performing at your best? Different tools to get you there, different things that we can game plan, that we can drill in camp that, lead you to that moment, so that to make sure that the same way that, from a physical standpoint, everything is drilled and trained and ready to go. On the mental standpoint, it's the exact same way. Everything's kind of refined and specialized and planned out so that you can peak when you need to.
Yes, that's a great point that you bring up, is just being able to control what you're doing, not really focus on outcome-based things. On my board behind me, it's mirrored, but it says inputs. And it's like, I have an awareness of the key metrics of things that I'm looking to push, but I can't really control the outcome. But when I do realize the correlation of like what inputs do move that outcome, so say, like training in a very specific way and working on weaknesses, those are more likely to produce the outcomes that we're looking for. But when we like overly focus on these outcomes, and we obsess about these outcomes, especially ones that we can't control each and every variable, it's like, that's not a healthy way to approach training. So I understand where we're trying to go. Now, how do we get there? What are some of the things that you're using as far as tools to get, let's say, Ross from a position of, okay, we're training, we're putting in the hard work. Now, what are you adding to his camp and then his approach?
It's a good question. I think that's a really important one, which is it's not just enough to know where you want to go. You need to know how you're going to get there, right? We need a process to be able to refine that, to be intentional with what we're doing. So, a great example of that is something as simple as training, right? You go to training and people assume, well, I'm training, X amount of hours per week. I'm putting in my time. Why shouldn't I get, where I want to be going? The question is it quality or quantity, right? You could be training 3 times a day every day, but what happens when you train that frequently? I mean, we've all felt it. Sometimes you feel like you're on autopilot a little bit, right? You're there, you're working hard, but you're kind of going through the motions. You kind of feel like you're clocking in and clocking out. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a natural byproduct of just doing anything for that long, as often as we train. I mean, the best fighters in the world feel that way, but it's not ideal. Right. Training is the place where you grow the most, where you take risks, where you succeed, where you fail. Like if we can stretch out the value of practice, well, that's going to increase kind of what we're going to see from ourselves over the long term. So what's a tool to be able to do that? Well, one of the most simple things is to set specific, meaningful goals for every individual training session that you're doing. So, if I walk into, let's say a Muay Thai class, 7 to 9 o'clock, and before the class starts, I say, hey guys, what's your plan for today? What's your goal? I feel like a lot of people will say, what do you mean? I'm here. I'm just here to work hard, put in this works, whatever it is. Like that's what they're thinking. Like, I don't really have anything specific I'm here for. I'm just here to work hard. And it's like, okay, but what if you added another layer to that? So maybe, someone as an individual, they say, I really want to work on my turning kicks. Right? I really want to get that timing down from my back kick or from my spinning hook kick, right? I really want to get that down. And it might not be pretty at first, but I really want to try to figure out the timing for that, right? Someone else, it might be clinch. Somebody else, it might be their movement and their stepping and their ring management. So it's like, give yourself 1 or 2 or 3 things that you specifically want to focus on over the course of this training session and work towards that. Is it going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect, but that's how you add value by being intentional with your time, right? So I think that's one tip of how do we take something as simple as a regular training session and just add value to it.
Yeah.
Give yourself 2 to 3 specific goals that you're really there to focus on. And hey, if that means you have to lose a couple sparring rounds because you're putting your ego to the side and you're working on your movement and your distance and your setup, well, that's what we need to do, but that's how you get better. So I think that's one example of just adding intention to what we're doing and not just getting carried away with thinking that hard work will trump everything else.
Yes. Yeah, that's a perfect example of maximizing and optimizing training sessions. Like you said, it's so easy to just phone it in. It's so easy to just say, oh, I've done, especially when you're doing 3-4. Like if you're doing the Kobe, the Black Mamba approach of training, it's very difficult to totally be all in every second. There's a, physical fatigue and physical overworking that you can experience, but the mental overworking is just as huge. But then as time goes on, you build your work capacity for both sides. So it's like, I may be able to do 40 rounds like a Manny Pacquiao because I was doing 5 rounds in the beginning, then 10 rounds, then 15. And then there is a way to build up to that capacity. Same thing mentally. If you can stay sharp round on round on round, imagine the discipline that is going to carry over into your sparring sessions and your fighting. And like you said, leaving the ego at home or finding out that you can maximize your ego, because if your ego is truly trying to help you and you're trying to become the best fighter of all time or the best fighter in your area or the best sparring partner in your gym, whatever your goals and intentions are, you can still tell yourself, I want to be the best. And in order to be the best, I have to make sure that I'm not going, in there and just phoning it in. I have to be intentional. I have to work hard. Even if I lose this battle, I'll win the war. It's like, it's all good. I can lose this battle, but I'm not trying to win the war. That's a great way of improving your sessions right away. Please, if you're listening, become more intentional with your next training session. Next thing, what are some other ways and approaches that, we could apply to ourselves?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think another very important tool is being able to understand self-talk, right? I think self-talk is one, it's just that voice in the back of your head. And, more often than not, it's negative, it's critical. And, there might be some people listening to this thinking, what? I don't feel like I have that voice in my head. And it's like, it's not that you don't have it. It's you just don't have the awareness that it's there. It's very deep in the subconscious. I mean, think about it. Usually the very first thought of our entire day is negative, right? The alarm goes off and you're thinking, oh my God, right? I'm exhausted, or I'm sore, oh, my shoulder, right? So very first thought most of the time, of the day is something negative, and that just persists. It persists. It happens in training. It happens in the fight itself. So number one, having awareness that it's there is important. And then number two, something that we work on is how do you reframe that from something negative to something positive, right? I think a lot of people talk about trying to block out negativity and avoid it. I personally don't really believe in that. I don't think it's possible, and I don't think it's helpful to try to make that the goal. I don't think you can just plug your ears and say, I'm never going to have a negative thought again. It's the equivalent of saying, like, I'm never going to get punched or kicked again. Like, no, you will, but let's develop your defense. Right. So instead of being the person that's scared of getting kicked and punched, it's no, I'm going to get kicked and punched, but I trust my defense to be able to set me up for success. So it's the same thing with self-talk. It's like, no, I'm going to have negative thoughts, but how can I learn how to add this kind of filter system in me that can translate that negative to the positive? So for example, let's say you're walking out into the ring and, you're feeling a little bit sore, aches and pains, you're warming up in the back room and you maybe don't feel 100%. That's a moment where most people think, man, like, I'm feeling this from training. Like, I'm not 100%. It's not fair. Like, I don't know if I can go out there and be me. A good way to reframe it is like, man, I'm so prepared. Like the fact that I've got
exactly
these little,
what I thought.
These little aches and pains.
I was like, look how much work I put in for this shit, dog. I'm not going out there like, undertrained. I can feel the body is fucking tired, but also, like you said, finding that silver lining. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's like, this is just these little aches and pains are just indications of how hard I've worked, how prepared I am. Right. So we're taking the same stimulus, the same input, that you have on your board, and we're changing the output, right? You can't change. I don't think you can change that natural input from things that are coming at you from the outside. That's not in our control, but we can control the filter that we have. And that's one thing I like to say all the time is like, we're not building force fields, we're building filters. Don't try to block off the outside world. Welcome it, because you can't control that stuff, but you can control your own response. You can control how you kind of interpret that and what your output's going to be. So I think that self-talk is a big, really important thing, where if you feel yourself getting critical and overly negative, how can I spin this into something good? How can I spin this into something positive? And it's very tough to really get solid at it, but it has to start sooner than later, because every day you go on without being mindful of this, you're just adding more and more days of building a bad habit.
Yeah. How do you check, monitor, and then how do you implement? How long do you think it takes to start sticking?
Takes a long time. I think so. The way that I like to format it is almost, and you can do this at home too. It's like a very simple T-chart, right? On one side, what are all of the different kind of negative inputs that I see throughout the day or that I feel? Is it I'm tired, I'm sore, I don't want to be here, I don't like going with this partner, all the different things that come up, right? Even the silliest ones, right? Oh, like, this is what I have for lunch again. I hate this one. Or, my energy's so low from cutting weight, all these different things. And then challenge yourself on the other side of that T-chart to figure out what can be a positive response to that, right? It could be anything. Maybe it's like, maybe you're kind of newer at your gym. You hate going with, one of the pros because they always push you hard and it kind of scares you. And you can turn that into, instead of the negative side being, oh my God, I hate going with this person. I hope that, coach doesn't match me up with her or with him. It's how lucky am I to have access to such high level training partners? Right. The fact that I can feel nervous right now in my own gym, it's such a blessing, right? A lot of people, you become so good and so experienced that you have to really search out that like nervousness from other gyms and bring out training partners and like fly them out sometimes. It's like, man, if I have exposure to this sense of nervousness and fear in my own gym, that's such a win. So trying your best to connect every negative to, a brainstorm of positives and being really familiar with that. So the first step is just having the awareness that's there. And the moment that negative statement comes in, being able to go, oh, okay, I know you. I'm aware of this. This is something negative. Phase 2 is being able to remember what's that positive trigger. And then phase 3 is being able to make that so seamless that it's just boom, boom, negative to positive. And that's what takes the longest to do. But if you can do it and you can start now, you start to build that kind of railroad in the right direction. And that's all you need to get started, is just kind of look at the negatives, create a few positives out of that. And now you become a naturally more optimistic person. Even for a lot of people listening that are like, I don't know if I'm an optimist. You can be. You just have to train it. The same way that you weren't always flexible or explosive or whatever. All these mental skills, they're skills. You build them, you develop them. It's the same thing like on the physical side. You just need to know how.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges that, like, do you have specific athletes that, you can, that that come to mind that have had challenges, and how you were able to use some of these things to reframe?
All the time. I think, I think different athletes get different things out of this type of work. I think, a big misconception with mental training, it's like, I need to have something wrong with me to then go pursue a mental performance coach.
Yeah.
Right? That's really not the case at all. It's the same thing where it's like, if you're going to a striking class, does it mean there's anything wrong with your striking? No, you might have actually phenomenal striking, but if I'm going to go work with you, Micah, it's because I want to make that striking even better. I'm not going to work with you because I have terrible striking. Maybe some people are, but a lot of people I'm sure you work with have really good striking, and they just want to challenge themselves in different ways to see it from a new lens, to hear your feedback.
Yeah.
Right. So I think mental training as a whole, of course, you have people that come in that know exactly what they're there for. And maybe they deal with performance anxiety, or the stress that comes with it, or, the negative self-talk that they can't, get over. A lot of people, perfect example being Ross, who you just spoke with. Ross is extremely mentally tough. He's extremely focused. He's extremely goal oriented. So that's not somebody that comes in saying, hey, Dylan, I need you to fix me. It's like, I feel pretty good. And that's without doing anything. How good could I be if I add this component? And that's someone that, I think Ross is someone that comes in and says, I'm already great, as my kind of baseline. How high can I rise that when I put the right people in place? So, different people come in for different reasons. So the work that we'll do will kind of be tailored based off of that.
Man, this is a great, conversation, because I think so many people find this so abstract because it's the mind, right? The mind in itself is a giant universe, and they don't really see it as mental management systems and filtration to be able to focus in the specific ways that you need to be able to focus. What's your mindset on just like positive affirmations, on mantras? Where are you on that? Because obviously that's a popular thing.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think there's so much out there kind of online. You have to be able to use your best judgment. At the end of the day, it needs to be authentic to you, right? A mantra that Anderson Silva uses to himself might not work for Conor McGregor. It might not work for GSP. It's like, you have to be yourself, right? So it's one thing to just see like, oh man, what's John Jones doing? I want to do the same thing. It doesn't always work. Right. Yeah. So it's about figuring out, what do I need to hear from myself, and how can I repeat that message up until the point where it becomes true? Because going back to that whole self-talk thing, we spoke about, language is very rarely neutral, right? It's either we're working in the positive direction or in a negative direction, right? It's very, very rare, to see something that is just zero, right? So, the way that those mantras come in and those kind of positive self-talk statements, it just feeds more into that good, more into that positive, right? It's like, if I don't want my baseline to be critical and negative, what am I going to do to make sure that I'm reinforcing some sort of positive? Whether it's looking in the mirror, putting your hands up and saying, I am a champion, and visualizing at the end of a fight when the referee raises your hand, go for it. If it's saying specific things that are, meaningful to you about confidence, about self-esteem, anything that you want to hear, it's just important that any message you repeat to yourself is kind of custom tailored to you. That's how you get the most value out of it. But of course, I think anytime you can reaffirm any sort of positivity, affirmations in that sense, it's great, because what that means is the more time you spend on, positive phrasing of things, the less time you have to be critical. And if you can't be neutral and you have to pick one, let's pick positive, because the alternative kind of sucks.
Yes. Now, like you've talked about, what are some of, I guess, the success stories that you've been able to kind of generate? You've mentioned Ross and sharpening his mind. What are some other success stories that stand out to you?
Yeah, there's a ton, right? And I don't want to take full credit for them, because obviously, as an athlete, we have a big team behind us. But I think for me, one thing that I always like to see is being able to turn around a losing streak. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do that a few times with athletes that have gone from, I just, spoke with an athlete 30 minutes ago, and, when he started working with me a couple of years ago, he was 0-3, and now he's 4-3. Right. Nice. There's another athlete, he fights in the PFL, who I think he was on like a 6-fight win streak, a 6-fight losing streak, cut from the UFC, and now he's on like a 6-fight finish streak,
Nice.
right, where he's winning.
What's
so
his
it's
name?
like Anthony Ivy.
Anthony Ivy. Nice.
Yeah. He fights for. He just fought last weekend. Was it for Fury? He fights for Fury a lot of the time. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
His nickname's the Aquaman, but people like that, where it's
what was like the difference, I guess, that he gave, what was the thing that he was crediting you on that took him from, I guess, the mental state that he wasn't performing the best to where he feels now very positive and literally finishing people constantly?
I think it's just a structure thing for a lot of people. It's about, there's a frustration when you lose a few fights in a row and you're thinking, what can I do differently? I'm working as hard as I can. I'm training as hard as I can. I'm doing everything in my power to succeed. Like, I'm committed. What is going wrong? And sometimes it's just a quick little flip on the other side. It's like, physically you're good. It's not about adding another training session. It's not about adding another conditioning session. It's about, let's make sure that the quality of what you're doing is there. So let's look at that training session, and going back to what I talked about before with the training goals. Are you just training and sweating and working hard, and that's why you think it's a valuable session? Or are you making significant progress towards goals that you've set that will make you a better fighter in the ring? So a lot of the time it's just adding quality, to what's going on, and being able to, flip the switch in people. And sometimes that's all it is it's just looking at something from a bit of a different perspective. And that kind of sets you on the right path. And once you have the momentum behind you, we fuel that with the right sort of exercises and tools behind it. And now, you go and you end up fighting to the best version of yourself, which is what I was saying at the beginning is the most important thing. Let's not chase the accolades. Let's chase the, possibility of just the best you. What does that look like when, you just have everything that you're capable of? When we start to chase that, the results kind of take care of itself. And I think that's the magical part of it.
Yeah. Evidence-based training is where your confidence is going to come from. And I'm glad that when, I knew that Ross was not going to mention anybody who's totally just about positive mindset kind of ideas. Because, in this industry, it is so intangible that there's a lot of approaches that aren't really based in reality. Yeah. And you're going to feel so much more confident. You're going to be able to say words that are true to yourself if you can go back and look at all the training sessions and see that they weren't meaningless, that you were able to turn over every single stone, that you can look on paper and say, this was my focus for this day, and I was able to hit these things. Even when you weren't able to hit them, the fact that you were even attempting to hit these things gives you power and confidence. You're like, look at this. I didn't waste the day. I didn't waste a training session. And I notice a lot of people, they kind of will use this ability to build their cardio and toughness in exchange for meaningful development. And that's where I feel like a lot of fighters will they'll do an extra run or some extra push-ups, or, it's like, dude, that is not going to give you the confidence you need. There's always going to be a bit of doubt inside your brain based off of, I tried hard.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think everybody wants to know the trick to confidence, and I think confidence comes from preparation, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more prepared you are, the better you're going to feel. It's like anything. If you had to take a pop quiz on a subject you had no idea on and you weren't prepared for, your confidence level can't be too high. Versus if you studied and every question, your confidence is going to be there. It's the same thing with training. The better you prepare, the more intelligently you prepare. The more intention you put behind it. All of those things matter a lot. Of course, volume matters, but at a certain level, you can't train more, right?
Yeah.
If you're training 3 times a day, 4 times a day, is a 5th training session, is that going to be the difference maker? Probably not. And you can't win. And this is what I say all the time. You can't win on quantity, but you can win on quality, right? If you're training 3 times a day, someone's training 4. If you're waking up at 6 a.m., someone's up at 5. Like, you can't win. Someone will always be doing more from like a quantity standpoint. Yeah. But hey, quality, nobody's going to beat me. If I'm training twice a day, 3 times a day, or even once a day, whatever it is, I'm going to make it so worthwhile and get so much out of that session that nobody can beat me on quality. And I think a lot of confidence comes from that, not just doing more, but having more value in what you're doing.
Yeah. Do you see any trends, I guess, with people? Like, I don't think anybody was using a mental performance coach maybe like 10 years ago in the sport of MMA. I didn't hear it. It was completely unheard of. Now we see, more and more people not only understanding how important the mental side is, but actually applying it. So, going and seeking out a coach like yourself. Do you see that as something that's going to be, like standard practice in the next 10?
I hope so. Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because this field isn't actually new at all, but it's very old school, right? It's very academic. It's very clinical. There's a lot of people that, have been working with sports psychologists and stuff like that, but you don't really talk about it. You kind of keep it in the shadows. You kind of keep it secret. And I think that hasn't helped a lot, for the industry. And I think for me, that was my goal coming into this, being a little bit younger, having the sport experience, understanding, the real life kind of applications of it. Like, I want to make this cool. I want to make this something that people are excited to do, something that people are proud of doing. When we're done doing a session, they want to post about it. They want to share about it. They like having me in their corner.
Yeah. Nobody wants to look like a bitch, right?
There you go.
Nobody wants to look like, oh, I need help for my brain because I feel weak.
Yeah. But then you think on the flip side, everybody likes to post, a good post-workout pic, or when they're done with their strength and conditioning coach. Nobody posts a picture, after a strength and conditioning session worried like, well, will people think I only did this because I'm weak? It's like, no, go show off. So I think it's cool to be able to kind of flex on the fact that like, yeah, I'm working on my mind too. And like, you thought I was good before, wait till you see how sharp I am now. And I just feel like that's the spin I wanted to put on it, and kind of be a pioneer for this new generation of it, and make it cool. I mean, I was the first mental performance coach to corner on UFC Fight Pass, which was awesome. And to make that walk and like do things like that haven't been done before. I think for me, that's a big part of this kind of new wave, is making it popular, making it cool, letting people know about it. I think there's a lot of people even listening now who are like, yeah, I've always been interested in the mental side of the sport, but I never really knew where to go or what to do. Maybe there's a book you read, or a Instagram page you follow, or a podcast you listen to, but a lot of people, it's not as accessible, right? If you need to get a massage and your coach says, hey, your body's sore, go get a massage, quick Google search, there's probably 5 places on your street where you can go get a massage. If your coach says, hey, you're doing great mentally, I think, we can sharpen that up a little bit. Where do you go? What do you do? Right. So that's a big part, is to just kind of, make this as big as we can, make it popular, make it cool, make it something that people want to do and can really share the benefits of. And I think that's kind of my responsibility as the next generation of this, is pioneering kind of the new way to do this, and to do it in the most successful way that we've seen.
100%. And if people want to work with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think Instagram goes a long way. If you search up @mindlock, with an underscore after that, there's a ton of information there, different videos. You can see who we're working with, updates and stuff like that. Send me a DM. I'm always there. You can send an email, info@mindlock.ca. I think those are the 2 best places to go. But I think Instagram, I'm there all the time. Send a DM, take a look at the page, the different videos that we have, see who we're working with. I think that's always a good place to go. So send me a DM. I'll definitely see it and get back to you.
Man, it's been epic. I could probably pick your brain for the next 40 years, but this has been a great starting point. I want people to not, drown in information, take 2 real key pieces that will change their game immediately. So please implement these things. So, take that T-chart, make that T-chart, think about all the ways that you've been struggling mentally, and figure out a way to find the silver lining in those thought patterns. So what's the inverse to the negativity that you're already dealing with? And then on top of that, being intentional. I preach this all the time when people are shadow boxing. I tell them, visualize landing the perfect shot. What is their head doing when you land that shot? When you block a kick, when you check a kick, visualize the impact, visualize your stability. And then now that's a little bit more intentional focused work. Thank you so much, Dylan. It's been a treat. And I think a lot of people are going to get some huge results from this. So, thank Dylan. We appreciate you, my brother. And
thank you,
I can't
sir.
wait to
This
talk
was great.
again. I can't wait to talk again.
Looking forward to the part 2, brother. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah. If you want part 2, please comment down below, like, subscribe. Peace out.